McKinsey recently came out with a report that they claim can measure productivity of software developers. It instantly became controversial. Why are these MBAs trying to reduce our sacred craft down to just a few numbers, right? Is it reliable enough to determine who gets a promotion and who should be fired? Welcome to SRE 101, the podcast about all things DevOps and reliability. I am your host, Raghav. I have a very special guest with me on today's episode. Meet Dhruv Aggarwal. Dhruv has been my colleague, mentor, and a close friend ever since I started my career out of college. We've worked together at two different companies. Dhruv is currently the co-founder and CEO of Middleware, a company that focuses on giving actionable engineering insights. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Raghav, thank you so much. Pleasure is all mine, and really proud to be your friend and loved all your episodes that you have released so far. And that's why I'm grateful to be on this show.
Please tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm an engineer turned entrepreneur with a dream of building something of my own since I ever came across developing software.
Middleware is an engineering management platform
Which helps you detect what is blocking your team so that you can unblock and your team can get back to building instead of being on meetings and follow-up calls. Before starting this, I was a senior engineering manager based out of Copenhagen. Before that, I was working with Raghav at Subtle and also an engineering manager. So this problem of not knowing where my team is stuck used to perturb me as well as my peers. This was not only limited to us, but was also widespread across the whole globe's engineering managers. And that's why I started middleware with one of our colleague and dear friend Jen, who was at Uber back then and was facing the same problem of being stuck on follow-up meetings and many calls just to tell what he's building while he was not getting any time to build.
What is DORA metrics exactly?
Before jumping right onto the DORA metrics, there are a couple of things which we should talk about as a primer. Why do engineering teams exist in any business? Not all businesses are tech businesses. Still, every business now has an engineering team, has a software, whether it's an app or a web app or an internal tool. Because engineering team builds something which can scale up very fast. So when your business is used by many people, the cost of scaling up is very low if it's a software engineered product, which in comparison to any other product or any other team is very different because most of the other teams are either operations driven or human driven or brick and mortar driven. Their impact is very linear. Hence, every company requires engineering teams nowadays because if you're building products for a large number of people, you need to scale up fast, and hence you need engineering teams to build your software, which can scale up fast to the growing customer base or the growing audience that you want to cater to. Then comes the need of basically when every department is being scrutinized on how they're performing, how they're not performing. People see departments like sales or marketing being assessed onto their impact versus their effort being put. And then the next question comes that why can't we do the same for engineering, right? That's a kind of debate which is going on for a long time in the boardroom, but with the recent change in the funding market and companies laying off people, it is difficult to raise new funds. Each department is being scrutinized for their ROI. And now people are way more concerned about measuring every team that they can.
Yeah.
So now taking the segue of comparison of sales and engineering, sales is meant to bring in revenue. So their job is defined to bring in business impact, right? While engineering is there to suffice the building of idea to a product. So engineering's job is to make the idea into a product. Now, even if the engineering works very hard, either the idea can be wrong or the final product or the design product experience that the product managers expected or the founders expected might be wrong and not fit into the market, and hence the business does not succeed. And we have had all the examples of big companies and fan companies releasing products which just have a nosedive once they release.
So there's a very popular joke in the DevOps circles that sure, our company didn't make any money and we went bankrupt, but the Kubernetes cluster that we created was beautiful. So that's what you remind me of.
There's a flaw in the whole premise of comparing a parallel from engineering to sales, where sales is a very impact-driven role, while the impact of engineering is dependent on the idea that they are building and the final product that they render. I don't advocate running blind, right? Running your team blind. You still need to understand if you're running your team efficiently or not. And that brings us to the point of efficiency in software teams. When you're talking about efficiency, there's no silver bullet yet. The industry is still new because 10 years, 15 years back, there were very few tech companies that were mostly brick and mortar businesses. And in the last decade, there has been an influx of so much money from the VC circuits across the globe that most of the companies in the world are now tech companies. And those tech companies grew in number in the last 10 years. And that's when people are managing engineers for the first time and do not know how to do it. And hence, there is no silver bullet to how an engineering team should function. It is still highly contextual and complex to the product you're building, to the quality of talent you have, to the culture you have in your organization. And hence, every process, every kind of behavior, every benchmark will be bespoke to your own team. So, how should one measure efficiency? Because you don't know the right behaviors, there's no point in calculating line of code or any output effort or output driven metric, because that is futile to measure, that is gameable, and that does not guarantee success. So to make your engineering team successful, for them to deliver your idea to a product, you have to reduce anything that is blocking them, and you have to improve their chances of success. So how do you do that? We'll start from the very top. So engineering team is responsible for converting idea to product. Engineering leaders are responsible to do two things. One, ensure that the pipeline which delivers this idea to product is flowy. The people are not locked on anyone. The people are not stuck on their own rework and back and forth, so that they keep moving. And secondly, the people who are involved in this pipeline, they are coached, they are mentored to become better engineers.
Yeah.
So if you talk to me about efficiency, you have to take the signals which are blocking your team and you have to remove them to unblock your team to make them more efficient. Because if you have 8 hours of work instead of 4 hours of time to work, you will be able to do more on what you could do in 4 hours. So you'll be doing more in that time. And then what you do can be improved from coaching your engineers using the signals across different tools. So DORA metric is a framework which tells you about how healthy is your team in shipping your committed code to production stably. To do that, DORA metrics proposes 4 metrics to measure. One is lead time for changes, which means time taken from one commit to land in production. Second is deployment frequency. How soon is your team deploying the code? Is it multiple times a day? Is it once a day? Is it over weeks? Is it once a month? If it's a few instances, then that just means that while your work is ready, your customers are not receiving newer updates. If there was an issue, maybe your team would not ship the fix on time. The third metric is change failure rate, which means out of the all times that you deploy, how many deployments trigger an incident in production. Now, you being an SRE, you have burned a lot of midnight oil in solving those
Horror
incidents.
stories, yes.
Right? So that's change failure rate. If you do 100 deployments and 60 result in an incident, so one, you pray to God, and second, your change failure rate becomes 60%. And lastly, there's mean time to recovery or mean time to resolution, which means how soon is your team able to bring back the system from an incident or from a downtime state. So first two metrics are for speed, second two metrics are for stability, and combine these 4 metrics. These tell you how soon or how healthy or how flowy is your team in bringing one committed code to production stably.
Suppose I am a manager or I am a very senior engineer who is on a path to being a leader, or I aspire to be one. Why should I be caring about DORA metrics at all?
DORA metrics is not the silver bullet. It is one of the signals which you can gather to ensure that your team is efficient or whether your team's software delivery pipeline is flowy. One phase is planning, then you start development, and that's where the DORA metrics kicks in. That's one chunk of it. It can be totally possible that your team's DORA metrics are fine, but there are smaller quality issues in your code and lower level design, which take away the flow of your team. DORA metrics is a great signal which gives you a symptom whether your team is suffering from slowness in delivery or not. Most of it, at least on the speed part, is a piece of collaboration. So if you see lead time, right, you can break it down into 5 chunks, which is the time taken from your commit to opening a PR, then the time taken from opening to PR to getting a response from any of your peers, then the time taken for you to work around to get an approval, which can be rework time. Then the time that you took from your first approval to merging the PR, which is just merge time, should be very less usually. And then the time taken for this code to go into production after it was merged. So now, if it's usually high, and of course, there are some benchmarks which studies like State of the DevOps, etc., and Google publishes with their surveys. But let's say you are trying to improve this, you can arrive at a point where you can detect where is your team struggling in either of these 5 phases. But let's say you found out that rework was very high in your team. That means that despite all your planning, despite all your code time, even if you improve anything, your people are just running like a rat in that whole wheel.
Oh, so it's like there's 5 pillars holding on to one structure, and if one of those pillars does not work, then your structure does not work.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, there are also teams which are very quick in merging PRs, right? They don't review at all. And hence you can see a lot of incidents happening. You can see that their change failure rate is very high. So it's a
Yeah.
way where you can ensure that your team is balanced among your speed and quality. And you have to find that rhythm by doing many experiments.
Isn't it always a fight between velocity and stability of your production environment? Because even what I've seen other people experience is if they try to increase the velocity, the stability kind of starts going down because people are now under the pressure to approve more and more of changes to increase the frequency. Because let's face it, we want to ship more features to our customers. And you try doing the other way, which is basically as an SRE, that's my job. I try to increase the stability, which in turn just pushes down velocity further. And then everyone's looking at me like this is the guy because of the velocities. So,
Yeah.
and so isn't this always a fight? What do we do about this?
So that's why I said that it's a journey. And in that journey, you have to discover at what velocity or at what flow are you not poking more holes into the system. And that's a journey for every team. It's not a benchmark, it's not a number which one can just start following tomorrow because they might have more potential or they might struggle keeping the system stable. And I strongly discourage ranking people on just the velocity of things because that starts gaming the system and deviation of focus from what one has to do. So one has to just convert those ideas into a stable product. So yes, there is always a fight, but that's where a leader's role comes in, that they have to lead their team to that balance mark, to that balance fine line where they define that this is the delay that we can afford so that our product is stable, right? The best velocity otherwise can be just push the code directly to master and deploy to production. And then everyone just warms their hand on the
Is happy.
fire.
Everyone is happy.
Yeah, on the fire that just goes through, but the customers are not happy. That's why you introduce planning to ensure that the end customer doesn't face any issues while also keeps on receiving new and new features.
Many companies today don't use DORA metrics. I myself wasn't aware of this concept before you and I started talking about this podcast episode. So, what are these companies actually missing out on? They don't have DORA, but they still seem to be doing fine, at least from the outside.
The software companies which we are talking about not having DORA metrics, if they are small, then they are working probably fine because they know the people know them, and there's an intimacy together of the team. So they can still call each other up and get things done. But as the teams get slightly large, 50 plus size, you will see a motion of more follow-up meetings, leaders asking for Excel sheets, an increased pressure of updating your Jira tickets. What is that for? That is only for the leaders to get visibility on where their team is stuck so that they can unblock them.
If you're saying that using DORA metrics means I'll have to attend lesser meetings, by all means, I'm in. Just count me in. Does middleware do DORA metrics?
We help organizations get DORA metrics for their team out of the box. You just have to connect your Git management system like GitHub or Bitbucket. You have to connect your deployer, GitHub Actions, and your incident management tool, which can be PagerDuty, ZenDuty. Once you just connect it, we give you all the metrics out of the box, and not just DORA metrics. We also link with your Jira and tell how your pipeline flows. Is there a lot of ad hoc in your team? Because if there's a lot of ad hoc, then forget about any predictability in your delivery or fulfilling the planned stuff. Or if your team is suffering from a lot of spillage, then why is that spillage? Is there a scope of estimation improvement within your developers? We give a lot of engineering insights which are actionable, which save all of your time, which you will be diving deep into your data or asking your people on a follow-up call or making exercises, which typically sums up to 20% of the whole engineering leadership time. But yeah, we do give DORA out of the box.
One of the pain points as a developer and as an SRE that I've faced, especially while I was working at startups, was there was such an influx of ad hoc tasks, ad hoc issues that just kept pouring in that there was like that amounted to all my
then
frustration where
people term them as urgent and important to the business or the founders.
exactly,
And
right?
then the founders said so.
Everything is an urgent priority thing, and then you realize that like the things that you actually planned out and committed timelines to other stakeholders, you just don't have the bandwidth to do all those things because these ad hoc issues just keep pouring in. And yeah, I think I would do anything to get rid of such issues and just push back on people who are actually coming up just now, ping me on Slack, and they're like, this is an urgent thing, start doing it.
I think working with you, I remember that you would not push back, you would push the people off the cliff. So, but you're right, Raghav. There has to be a thin line on how much ad hoc you can take in, and the product managers or anyone who's giving you the task should understand that a team's flow breaks if you just keep on giving them more surprises. It increases more fatigue. While it doesn't render anything out which is magically better, so you would do normally as for your planned task, and if there is anything urgent, you can just put a threshold like 20% ad hoc only for every developer. And that's how you tackle it better. And then 80% time is still given to the planned work so that you never spill on what's the larger goal and your roadmap on the product.
So McKinsey recently came out with a report that they claim can measure productivity of software developers. And it instantly became controversial. Some people said that, people are just going to game through the system and it's not actually going to be a very helpful system to implement. What's really going on over there? Like, why are these MBAs trying to reduce our sacred craft down to just a few numbers, right? Is it reliable enough to determine who gets a promotion and who should be fired?
There are a couple of abstract points which I really like about that. One was that we were talking about breaking the black box of engineering and starting to measure something for that. While the things that they're proposing are not the right things to measure, but the idea of breaking the black box is valid. That generally encourages fair work in the team, more collaboration. Keeping it a black box might restrict a team. Second thing is that with this recent change in the funding regime and companies not being able to raise more and hence they are cutting costs, there's an active question from the CFOs and the CEOs of the world that do we even need like 100 engineers to do the work or can 80 suffice? And then the CTOs do not have answers. And hence these guys turn to McKinsey or any other consultancy firms who now had to give an answer to them. And that's why I would guess they published a study to measure developer productivity. There are two abstract things, as I mentioned before, which I like about it. Rest, I am not in compliance with that. So the second thing I liked was that they split the developer's job into loops. One is an inner loop, which is build, test, and deploy. The other is the outer loop, which is follow-up meetings and other stuff that the developers have to deal with. So they encourage more time to be spent on inner loop and lesser distraction from the outer loop. So that's what I like as a concept. But other things like developer velocity index and talent compatibility, etc., were more capable in the system. I encourage not to do that. While what I encourage is that to increase the time in the inner loop, you can reduce the distractions for your developer. You can remove any bottlenecks that are forming. For example, one example, a senior engineer, everyone wants review from him or her, and you can train more people to review code so that you don't have those bottlenecks. You can improve your planning process to reduce rework. You can put thresholds on the product manager side to reduce ad hoc work, and that's how you reduce distractions for your engineers and increase in a loop time.
Another thing that often frustrates me as a developer is micromanagement. Like, I don't think there is any dev out there who likes to be micromanaged in any way. And yet, it's a very, very common and frequent occurrence that you'll see managers constantly trying to get an update and trying to see how you're approaching a problem. My perspective on this is, ideally, as a manager, your job is give the problem, give the context, and then just let them be. Let them figure out the solution. Let them come back to you if they can't figure out a solution, but not the other way around. What do you have
Absolutely.
to say about that?
So micromanagement comes from lack of trust. Either someone wants to have all the control and context and not give the context to anyone else to work independently, or the person would have this delegated work before without any visibility on what needs to be done, what is the timeline, and is the developer giving the timeline in a very detailed manner or not. And then once there was a delay and a pressure from top, they started micromanaging to shift that thing faster. And both the things are bad. A manager has to give all the context to the team so that they can work independently. I would rather encourage people to work with the developers who need your help in understanding how to break down a large task into smaller chunks and then work on it first so that both of you can come on to a consensus on what needs to be done, kind of a planning process, and then just have a chat with them whether they are on track or off track. And if they're off track, ask them if they need any help from you. And that's how you build trust and you build more collaboration. And you also coach them when they are breaking down the task. Of course, nobody likes micromanagement. Even the managers don't like being micromanaged from their managers, and hence they don't give any visibility. Um, and
It's a recursive problem. Yeah.
yeah, and that's a very sensitive area among these metrics tools, and that's why we are really concerned at middleware to be very cautious on not bringing out any gameable metrics or not bringing out any kind of visibility where people start micromanaging. Our focus as a platform is to reduce all distractions for the developers. We don't tell what the developers are doing. We just tell where are they stuck, right? What all areas do they need your help in improving, or where are they getting stuck? And yes, that's how we are preventing micromanagement while we are encouraging help from managers to their engineers and senior managers to their managers.
Dhruv, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Radha, for having me. And it was a pleasure talking about many things. I wish we could keep on rolling this, but I think we'll do that on the WhatsApp call anyway.